What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
Miller.
Jammin Jon.
Shredlord.
And we are back with another discography ranking, and one that I have been eager to get over with. Go over. Sorry, that came out wrong.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't.
Today, we are going to go over the entire discography of Motley Crue, because I suck at drawing stuff out of a hat. Now, to be fair, Motley Crue is kind of partially like one of my big gateways into metal because they were unavoidable on MTV. Saw their music videos. I also saw a lot of cooler music videos too. But yeah, they were kind of one of the bands that kind of introduced me to heavy metal. And then from there, I discovered infinitely better bands.
Never got into them, and that's where we're at. I had never really listened to a whole lot of it, but I have, you know. If you've turned on the radio at all since you've been alive, you've heard most of Motley Crue. And I didn't really know that until I got into this and realized how much Motley Crue I knew. And I'd never listened to a full Motley Crue album all the way through until this ranking. And God rest my soul, may I never have to ever again.
And I'm about where Noonan is, except I was listening to it on the radio earlier as a kid, as anyone, like you said.
Of course, unavoidable.
And then, I went through it, and I'm glad I was only exposed to it for the little bit I was.
Right.
There's some gems in here, like cumulative, I got a gun to my head. What's your 10 Motley Crue songs? Give them to me. There's probably 10. Yeah. That's why I bought that on vinyl. For the wife, though. She's a Motley Crue fan.
My exposure to Motley Crue was definitely early on in my childhood as well. My intro to metal, I think, was different from my cohorts over here in the sense that Ozzy is what got me into metal, so I was already living in two worlds. I really loved Megadeth and Metallica and the more thrashy side of metal, but because I loved guitar playing and anything to do with guitar playing, I loved a lot of hard rock and glam metal and stuff because that's where a lot of amazing guitar players made paychecks by joining those bands and trying to write hit songs. So I definitely was familiar with Motley Crue, but I will say that my preference was never really strong with Motley Crue. Once again, I liked the radio songs, but to me, I was more into stuff like Dio and Whitesnake and Dokken for George Lynch. Say what you want about Winger, but Reb Beach is a gross guitar player, incredibly underrated. Stuff like Wasp, Chris Holmes and Wasp. So more of that stuff, not so much the shake your ass metal of like Poison and Motley Crue.
More the underground glam metal.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
what I latched on when I heard, or came across the genre as a musician later in life, and I got into Dokken, really.
Yeah.
And bands like that. Wasp, I enjoy Wasp.
I love Wasp, man.
Headless Children, banger album. So let's get into the origin of this band. They formed in 1981 in Hollywood, California. Pretty much just imagine the whole, spaghetti scene in Lady and the Tramp, except it's like 4 of the longest rails of cocaine you've ever seen, and all the dogs have STDs. That's not the real story, but it's kind of believable. This band essentially started with Tommy Lee and then guitarist singer Greg Leon. They had a project that I believe was called Sweet Nine, and they were looking to form, like a legit band. Like they were just kind of like tooling around, and they were looking for some other members. And both of them ended up attending a farewell tour for the band London. And London featured a bassist that Tommy Lee kind of had his eye on. And that bassist's name is, and I have to read it because he's got a lot of names, Franklin Carlton Serafino Farana Jr., which is long for Nikki Sixx, apparently. Tommy was absolutely enamored with Nikki Sixx's stage presence. He had the look, he had the vibe of everything that he wanted this new band to be about. Greg was not a fan. Basically, he just said, he looks cool, but he can't fucking play. So Tommy and Nikki started hanging out. Nikki was showing off some songs that were rejected by London because they were quote-unquote too heavy, and those two hit it off. They were kind of like trading ideas. And Greg just ended up quitting. He ended up joining Quiet Riot not too long after that. It was kind of a short stint. But yeah, he just did not like Nikki Sixx, which, that's kind of a trend too. So they didn't have a guitarist or a vocalist, so they were kind of searching around for a guitarist. They were initially going to go with 2 guitarists, I believe. They ended up auditioning one, Robin Moore / Jeff Gill. He has both of those names listed, and I could not find anything on either one of them. And the other guitarist, Bob Deal, who would later pretty much take the moniker of Mick Mars. Apparently, at the audition, Mick Mars impressed him enough that they just flat out told Robin to fuck off right there. Like, no, we got our guy. We're good.
Dodged a bullet there, bud.
And then, strangely enough, spent their entire career trying to get rid of him and shit all over him.
Man, is that a weird theme on this one? So technically, their first vocalist was one Odine Patterson. I mean, he at least auditioned and he was listed in the archives because, yes, Motley Crue is on the archives. But Tommy was trying to get his buddy Vince Neil to come sing for him, which he initially rejected. So they kind of did a little bit of a thing with ex-London vocalist Michael White, but he also ended up quitting. Now, Vince Neil was in another band called Rock Candy with an I. And yeah, it's I didn't bother looking it up because it's
a
probably
play
terrible.
off of Montrose. Montrose had the hit Rock Candy.
Oh,
Yeah, Montrose had a hit song called Rock Candy, so I'm 99.9% sure that's where they stole it from. Sorry.
well, anyway, Rock Candy, apparently, Vince's band there was trying to go in a more new wave direction instead of doing like the heavy metal sound. So Vince ended up quitting that band and joining this band that still didn't have a name yet. Apparently, one of the earliest suggestions for a name for this band was from Vince Neil. And he suggested they name the band Christmas, which they all went, fuck no. And that is a brief story as to how Vince Neil almost ruined Christmas. Now, the name Motley Crue actually came from something that Mick Mars remembered. It was a show that he played with a different band, and I guess the manager described his band as a motley-looking crew. And they kind of just went with that and changed around the spelling, and voila, they had a name.
Okay.
So you mean Mick Mars came up with the name as well?
Yeah,
And yet they still tried to kick him out the entire career?
that's a fireable offense.
Oh
Man.
my god. A ridiculous band already.
What a piece of shit.
Yeah. And it's the only thing really I like about this band.
Yeah.
He's the only
He's-
one.
he's-
Mick Mars is
the only
easily
one.
Mick.
my favorite part
Yep.
of Motley
Yeah.
Crue.
Yep.
Mick, if you ever see this,
Oh,
you're the
man.
fucking man.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yep.
tolerated a lot. So the band ended up getting their first manager with one Alan Kaufman, who was assisted by one Eric Grief, which most people know him as being Death's longtime manager. This was kind of one of his earliest gigs. And they ended up releasing their first single, Stick to Your Guns / Toast of the Town, on Alan's label, Leather Records. It's leather with a U-R. They managed to get a distribution deal through that label, and on November 10th, or December 15th, because I got varying results here in terms of the release date of this debut album, they released Too Fast for Love. I had this at number 3. Honestly, I think this is a pretty decent album overall. Maybe minus one continuous theme that kind of goes through most of this discography, and that would be Vince Neil's vocals. There is an awful lot of sour notes on here. But this album's got like good old school heavy metal charm. Like they were definitely playing to their influences, which I would say are like Van Halen, maybe a little bit of Motorhead and Cheap Trick. Like they wanted the poppy hooks. They also wanted the edgy attitude. And they also had some pretty solid riffs on here. Livewire, I do like that song. It really is a solid song. Starry Eyes, Take Me to the Top, Piece of Your Action. Good, just solid heavy metal bangers. Like they really weren't necessarily glam at this point. Like I don't even think they found the right shades of rouge or mascara or any of that shit yet. It's a bit rough around the edges. Like the production's, kind of raw for the time. I will say that Tommy needed to lay off the cowbell. I swear to God, he tried to squeeze a cowbell in like every single song. But I also like the fact that the songs, for the most part, were like up-tempo, energetic. There's some solid lead work on here, too. Like, I don't like the song Merry Go Round, but the lead on it is really good.
Merry-Go-Round should be wiped from the memory and existence of everyone. And to all of you who have ever listened to the song Merry-Go-Round while listening to this album, you deserve a discount on your next ear exam. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, there's some overlap, I would say, with like Def Leppard's debut, which was definitely more a new album, though that debut is a lot better than this one, I would say. But overall, this isn't a bad album. I think it's pretty decent.
Yeah, this is 5 for me. It's middle of the road. I never really listened to this whole thing. The only one I heard was Too Fast for Love, and I like that song. I still like that song. The first riff has got that really cool vibe to it, and then they use it in like this extended pre-chorus thing. Take Me to the Top has some abrupt tempo changes, doesn't make sense to me, but the slower riff in that is all right, and the going theme with mine is I really started latching on to his guitar riffs and his tone throughout the whole discography mix. And I found out that I had a lot more respect than I already did. You know, I already appreciated the riffs that I did hear from the hits. It ultimately led to me liking guitar enough to pick it up. So in a way, it was inspiring a little bit because I had heard this shit way before I thought about guitar. Yeah, 5, middle of the road. It's just middle of the road Motley Crue to me, and their first album, and they do some better things off the bat.
I also have this at number 5, same as Miller. To me, I know a lot of people like laud this as like, oh, this is a great debut album and stuff, and to me it's just very average. Aside from Take Me to the Top and Livewire, I don't really care for a lot of the songs or any of the rest of the songs, to be honest with you. I can hear the energy, I can hear all the stuff that people appreciate about this album, but to me, for the most part, Too Fast for Love just sounds like an album from a band that never really made it. Like, they were passing around their demo hoping to get signed, and it just never happened. The songwriting was very basic. Everything was very basic. Good? Yes. Basic. And that's why nothing really stood out. So, not terrible. Number 5.
I had this at number 4. I mean, what can I say that hasn't really been said? The mix isn't terrible for 1981. I'll give it that. Musically, it's decent. Still, nonetheless, the guitar tone was kind of crunchy, and I thought that was pretty cool. Once again, I was shocked as to how many of these songs I had heard and didn't know they were Motley Crue songs. Livewire, I wasn't 100% that was Motley Crue. I had that confused with something else, but who cares?
It's a good song.
Yeah, it's a good song. In fact, I sing a little bit of Livewire most every day. I work in retail, and we sell Livewire Mountain Dew, and every single day, without fail, I see Livewire, and I go, Livewire! In the cooler. And, you know, that happens. So, not a terrible record. It's just kind of there. Vince Neil...
He could never sing.
I don't think he could ever sing. Like, and even in the beginning, like, why even try to hit that range, bro?
Dude, on with the show, man. Like, there's some sour notes
like,
on
did
that
anybody at any time during this recording just look over and be like, hey,
Something
stop it.
Not.
Stop it.
You know we hired you to be our singer, right?
Stop it. Yeah.
That was the engineer. You guys didn't pay me to produce. I'm just hitting the fucking button.
Yeah. It's all right. It's number 4.
So this actually generated some, like, you know, moderate underground success and actually led them to being signed by Elektra Records, which they re-released the album, I believe, that year or the following year, and it kind of blew up in the underground. Now, this is where they started going out on tour and would have their incidents. Some of them more famous, some of them less famous, almost all of them manufactured, though. Their Cruising Through Canada tour, let's see, the whole bullshit about them not being able to get through customs because, they have the spiked wardrobe, and Vince brought dirty mags. That was all PR stuff. They did throw the TV out of the hotel room, which that was true. And a very Motley Crue-like maneuver. They called it a fake bomb threat, I believe, at one of the venues. But yeah, this all culminated in the tour ending prematurely and being a financial disaster. But they got notoriety, which is the thing that Motley Crue thrives on, honestly. So they ended up changing management from Kaufman over to Doug Thaler and Doc McGee, who was pretty famous for working with more high-profile acts, Kiss, Bon Jovi. They wanted a guy that could really promote them. This also led to another theme with the band, litigation, because, of course, Kaufman sued him, and believe me, this band has seen the inside of a courtroom almost as much as they've seen the inside of rehab facilities. So they began work on their new album, which was supposed to be bigger, bolder. And, to kind of kick things off, Nikki Sixx got in a car wreck, and he was kind of laid up for a good chunk of this, but... this also kind of kicks off another theme, at least with Nicky. He got hooked on painkillers during this time, and that snowballed into heroin. And again, another theme that we alluded to, this is initially where the band started trying to scheme against Mick. They were trying to replace him, and they wanted someone like... fucking Yngwie Malmsteen or Jake E. Lee. They just wanted someone flashier, I guess. And Mick was just, kind of like the riff guy. Like, yeah, he wrote some cool leads too, but mostly he was known for his riffs. It actually took then bassist Bob Daisley from Ozzy to talk them out of it and say, listen, he's a good guy. Stick with him.
I've also heard in an interview where Mick Mars speaks on that incident and says that those 3 guys didn't have the fucking balls to do that shit to him, dude. And I believe him.
So this time they get famed producer Tom Werman to do the production on this one. And on September 23rd, 1983, they would release Shout at the Devil. This is my number one. Probably not a shocker in terms of like Motley Crue albums that I will willingly listen to. This is the one. Like, I kind of grew up on this one. I remembered hearing Looks That Kill. I was like, dude, that song's badass. And pretty much across the board, this is their breakout success. This is where the world got to know Motley Crue, whether they wanted to or not. This is also where they went for their tougher image, which honestly, they looked more like a post-apocalyptic roller derby, team, but whatever. This is where they really kind of focused on writing hits. Like, the songs felt way more put together. They had bigger hooks. The production was infinitely better. Like, the guitar tone on this album, I think, is really solid. Like, that's just a good, classic, heavy metal tone. To Vince's credit, he sounds better-ish. I mean, at least there's no ballads on here. Not yet. I'll bitch about that later. But this album has some absolutely killer songs. Dude, the title track, Looks to Kill, I mean, those two are, like, pretty much radio staples, but... Dude, Bastard, which is one of Tipper Gore's favorites. That made the Filthy 15. And, of course, Red Hot and Too Young to Fall in Love. I think these are really well-done songs. And, honestly, I kind of like their cover of Helter Skelter, which is not a lot of Motley Crue covers I like. So, yeah, that one's pretty solid. But, yeah, across the board, like, this is the album I think most of Motley Crue's old school fans think of when they think of Motley Crue. Like, this is the one that kind of made them a bigger name. And... it's kind of the last one that says pretty metal. Like, it's honestly a flat-out metal album that's going to, turn into something else later that I'm going to bitch about. But, yeah, this is actually a good album. I'll defend this one.
I had this at number 3. Yet another record that I couldn't believe I knew how many songs from. A bit more to the riffs, the guitar tone's a bit thicker and richer. The band has found that whatever groove they're in is the direction they're going to go, and they do fairly well with it. Even in parts of this, the vocals aren't total garbage, which is a blessing for what's to come. Looks That Kill is a great song. The lead in that I thought was really solid. Bastard is a great song. I really like Danger, 10 Seconds to Love. Yeah, this is all right. And that's where I stand, at number 3.
I have this at number 2. I really like this album. This is the album that gave them their identity. They had the image now, but more importantly, they had much better music than their first release to back that image up. It showcased an evolution to me in their songwriting. I think there's a drastic difference in the songwriting from the first album to the second album. The imagery was definitely trend-setting. What you want to say about it now, looking back on it, but what they were doing at the time was basically, it was a glam rock staple, and a lot of bands that looked up to Motley Crue would do this kind of imagery and in costumes, whatever you want to call it. So whether you like it or not, it was very influential. The whole Pentagram, Mad Max, whatever. But it was a pioneer album for glam metal. And I think one of the coolest things about this album is I also remember watching another interview, I believe, with Nikki Sixx, where he said that the record company did not really promote this album at all. Like, barely any promotion, and it still sold millions of copies. So that's pretty damn good for an album to sell millions of copies when your record label gave you zero support.
I also had this at number 1. For me, this is like really good representation of that glam hair metal scene and what it was. There was certainly a lot better stuff that would come very quickly here, but overall, everything seemed more focused, more seemed put together. They made good decisions. There weren't any like abrupt changes like in some of the, most of the other albums really. But God Bless the Children of the Beast. I like
cool
it.
Little instrumental.
Yeah, because no vocals.
Valid.
Great. Yeah. Helter Skelter, heavy as shit, red hot. Good tempo and feel, and I actually don't mind the vocals too much on that. They kind of fit with that song fairly well. Shout at the Devil, going back and listening to it with like trying to take everything else out, and like first time I've heard it, it's a good song. It's a really good song, and it represents that era pretty well. But if I hadn't heard it a million fucking times, Looks to Kill, I like that song. Mm-hmm. I still like that song, and again, Mick Mars is a fucking man. He's a riffer, bro.
So as Shred said, this album did really well. In fact, it went 4 times platinum, and they ended up being the opening act touring for Ozzy Osbourne on the Bark at the Moon tour. But this is also the period where, a lot of their stuff was starting to catch up with them. Namely all the drugs, the women, the constant scheming to get rid of Mick.
Snorting piss.
And fire ants, or just regular ants. I don't know. Just everything's just...
Both are unacceptable.
Yeah, totally. No. But this is also the point where they had one of their first really nasty incidents, and really publicized ones. So after a party, or during a party, Razzle, the drummer of Hanoi Rocks, decided to get in the car with a very, very drunk Vince Neil. Just credit, he was probably drunk too. And they decided to go on a beer run, and they got in a fatal car wreck. Vince was charged with DUI and vehicular manslaughter, and sentenced to a mere 30 days in jail, which he only served 18 of them. Thankfully, he ended up being sued in civil court for about $2.5 million. Yay. And the next album would be dedicated to the memory of Razzle. This is also the point where Nicky became more and more strung out because of his drug use. There's even debates as to whether or not Nicky actually played on this new album at all because he was in such rough shape. But in 1985, they entered the studio in very, very rough shape. And once again, with Tom Werman at the helm in terms of production, they would release Theater of Pain on June 21st, 1985. This is my number 7 album. Probably the biggest drop-off in terms of this ranking for me. I don't like this album at all, honestly. Like, there's a couple of decent songs, and I'll name the 3 songs that I actually do like. Use It or Lose It, Tonight We Need a Lover, and Save Our Souls. Everything else in this album, I just don't care for. First off, there was the image change. They went from the rough and tough roller derby, post-apocalyptic look, whatever the hell it was, to pretty much looking like the chicks they were trying to bang.
We're on our way! If you remember the music video to Home Sweet Home, everybody gets a phone call and it's like, I'm on my way! I'm on my way!
I hate
I'm on
song.
my way!
I hate that song so much. This is where I honestly feel like they kind of like started to lose their love of the metal riff. There's not a lot of stuff on here where it really felt more metallic. Like, you know, the first 2 albums, those are metal riffs. Flat out, like they're kind of more anchored in heavy metal. This really just kind of started feeling like a rock album. This was a clear decline, and I mean, you know, the band was in tatters, and I'm pretty sure, you know, Razzle turned over in his grave when he realized this was the album that they dedicated to him because it's pretty fucking bad. These songs felt like they really didn't like fine tune them all. Like, Keep Your Eye on the Money. It sounds like a borrowed AC/DC B-side. It's just lazy. It's flat. Very little of this really jumped out. It's just sort of a dull album altogether. And again, you know, the band was in kind of dire straits. So, I mean, I suppose I can understand, yeah, they weren't in the right fucking headspace to put out an album. You know, the record label's like, no, get your drug-addicted asses into the studio and put out an album. But, yeah, the results weren't great. So, yeah, number 7.
I had this at number 6. There's a harmonica solo. I mean,
it's the best part of the album.
You got that going for you. At this point in the game, really, I'm more just patting myself on the back going, hey, you know a song by Motley Crue. Smoking in the Boys' Room. You know, there's that. Not the greatest of songs. Vince, do you know that the notes being played are meant to be matched by the vocals? Did anybody ever tell you that? Because I feel like no one told you that. Yeah, this record is kind of bland. There's not a whole lot going on here. Even at this point, and I know we're only, 3 albums in? Even at this point, I was like, man, I just want this record to be over so I can move to the next one.
I remember the video for Smoking in the Boys' Room.
I do too.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Michael Berryman is the best part of the video.
Yeah. I mean, that is fair, because the rest of it is like, dude, this is a butt rock
It
fucking
is.
cover.
It is. It's just, it's a butt rock thing. Like, and to move from something as popular as Shout at the Devil was, and then write a butt rock album, and a bland butt rock album at that. There are a couple of, like, decent leads. Like, the lead in Keep Your Eye on the Money, as shit as that song is, the lead in that song is not terrible. And the riff for Use It to Lose It and Save Our Souls, it's alright. But, I mean, at this point in the game, there wasn't a whole lot going on. It's number 6 for me, and I'm thankful I don't have to turn it on anymore.
The riff for Use It to Lose It definitely is like the infancy of Wild Side.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been written yet. If
Yeah.
you listen to
Yeah.
Use It or Lose It, and then listen to the riff of Wild Side, it's not far off, man. I also have this at 6. The album production-wise kept improving, and to be honest, no matter how you feel about the song Home Sweet Home, it is a standout 80s classic ballad. And I will say that I do like the solo to Home Sweet Home. I think it's very well done. There's a lot of good melody in it. Between just that and maybe Smoking in the Boys' Room, this album is just kind of just fluff, genericy. Like, what did I write here? My biggest problem here is that sometimes it's just too upbeat. Like, it's too happy almost, to the point where, like, I feel like they want me to shake my ass instead of bang my head. And that's not metal.
And I would agree with them, too. I got it at number 6. It's
3 6s in a row. Oh, my God.
I know, right?
We're whispering at the devil.
Channel,
Wow.
right? Minus Home Sweet Home, Smoking in the Boys' Room, which those songs, Home Sweet Home, I'm fucking sick of hearing it. But going and wiping all that shit out, you know, it is a good representation of the time period.
Yes.
And Smoking in the Boys' Room is another. I do enjoy that song and the kind of rebel attitude that it has, I guess. I'm trying to find nice things, guys.
Hey, it taught us a lesson. Everybody knows that smoking's not allowed in school.
Yeah, you know? So 6, it was... Yeah, that's where it is. And you could tell that.
That's where it has to be. It's where it has to be.
You could totally tell it was just, you guys got to get some shit out. Got to get it out. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, for as happy as the album sounds like, they were not. Which is like, oh, just fake a smile and they'll buy an album.
They lost what little metal edge they had with the last
And they
album.
named it Theater of Pain. Like, by title alone, you're thinking, oh, pain, man, heavy, brutal.
Dark, yeah. No.
The only pain is in your hip from shaking your ass.
Someone's dead. Let's smile.
Well, we weren't the only ones that felt indifferent to this album. The band actually feels very indifferent to this one. And so did a lot of the critics. It was pretty much a mixed bag there. But despite that, this album also sold well. It went 4 times platinum as of 1995. Didn't quite make the marks as quickly as Shot the Devil. But still, it sold well because it had some singles. It wasn't too long after this that Nicky would have his first near-fatal overdose in 1986, which ended up with him waking up in a dumpster in England because the guy that, sold him all the drugs said, hey, you can't die here. Oh, you're not listening because you're almost dead. I'm going to just have to get rid of your body. Hard to believe that wouldn't be the last straw with the band saying, hey, this guy's got a problem. And by last straw, I mean the last needle. But, it still kind of continued on. So spoiler alert for the future. Yeah, there's going to be more of that. But at this point, drugs and just all-around dipshit behavior wasn't going to stop Motley Crue from ruining music because they had to get in the studio once again. So once again, reuniting with Tom Werman, they went in the studio in March of 1987, and on May 20th, 1987, they would release Chlamydia, Gonorrhea, Syphilis. Oops, sorry. Girls, Girls, Girls. This is my number 5. Oddly, it is a bit of an improvement in a lot of ways. First off, the glitzier production, it kind of works. It kind of works here. The crisper guitars, the more punchy drums, the array of effects on Vince's vocals to make him sound like he can sing. It kind of works. Like, this is definitely where they wanted to get like a much bigger sound. Like, you can tell you had backup singers, again, like everything was way more polished and they were more energetic, I would say. Like, this album does have some pretty solid songs. Like, I like Wild Side. It's a good song. It's catchy. Dance on Glass is a interesting reflection on the whole incident with Nicky. And Something for Nothing, honestly, it's just kind of a good flat-out rock song. But I will say this is also where the metal riffs really start disappearing entirely. Like, these riffs are more like heavy blues riffs, but they just like distorted the hell out of them, made them sound crunchy. And, well, I mean, they're hooky, they're poppy. This is definitely where, Motley Crue really started to kind of go for the pop aspect. They stripped away pretty much almost all the glam image on here, too. Like, this was less mascara, more riffs. Now, there's still some leftover stupid, though, like Bad Boy Boogie and You're All I Need. I don't care for those songs at all. Like, those are just easily discardable. And I have to say, the title track, which I've never been a fan of, That song and 5 Years Dead are essentially the same fucking song.
Yeah, yep.
Yes.
Yep, I said the same thing.
It's almost the same fucking riff, the same rhythm. Like, all right, they're not like rhythmically dynamic or anything like that. Like, Tommy can keep a rhythm, whatever. But it's the same damn song.
It's the same vocal inflection. Like, the second half of that chorus, when he says what he says, it's the same as Girls Go... Yeah, exact same. Yep.
And I have to say, all in the name of... Man, dude, like, I really haven't... really tried to break down Motley Crue's lyrics very much, and I probably really shouldn't have, because going over that song, I feel that song can't be played within 500 yards of a school. Like, Jesus, this shit's cringy. But yeah, number 5, it is an improvement. I will give it credit there.
Oddly enough, I had this at number 2. I thought it was a vast improvement coming from Theater of Pain, which I guess isn't saying a whole lot because that record's not that good. But it's got tighter riffing. Mick is fairly prominent in the mix. As much as they try to kick this guy out, he's like, nah, fuck you.
Here's the only thing that keeps him credible.
Here's a crunchier guitar tone and it's in your face, so right there. The drums are getting a little bit tighter. Tommy, say what you will about Tommy on drums, but he's solid. And there is some progression in his playing throughout the years. This whole album is on every classic radio station, once again, within anywhere in the country, I think in the world. If you're to turn on the radio, you're going to hear something off of this record. Wild Side, I think, is a great song. Something for Nothing, I think, is a great song. Even Girls, 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 as stupid as that song is, it's catchy. Say what you will.
Number 1 strip club in America song.
It's going to get stuck in your head regardless. Is there a batch of sour bass notes on Dancing on Glass? I actually had to listen to that song 2 or 3 times to try and pick it out, but I swear to God, there's a bunch of sour bass notes. I don't know.
Sour notes are a thing with this band.
They didn't listen to it. They just recorded it.
And the 5 Years Dead argument, it's the same. I don't care. It's the same thing. Like, you ripped off yourself. That's kind of dumb.
You played yourself. Congratulations.
In their defense, they just forgot what they were doing.
Fair enough.
So,
and
cocaine's a hell of a drug.
It sure is. All in the Name of Rock, I believe, is the anthem for Scandals for years to come. Like, if you listen to all those lyrics, you can just see it unfolding even in today's world outside of Motley Crue. I think that was just the anthem for Scandals. But yeah, I didn't mind this record.
Yeah, I have a pretty high too, number 3, because it's better than most of the shit, but not as good as some of the shit. But It's all just kind of shit. Especially like Nona, Dancing on Glass. I don't care for it, but again, the guitars. Like, the guitars are great for this. If we were to take it just from a guitar playing and tone and the rhythm he's got a really unique feel to his playing, the way he does his thing. It's probably higher. Wild Side, I like that song. Mm-hmm. I think it's decent. The guitar riffs are awesome.
Especially the later renditions of this. If you've seen him perform it lately, it's something to behold.
Yeah, and in that song, too, I think the vocal patterns actually fit. If there was something else sonically that was there instead of his voice, then the patterns would be great. Girls, Girls, Girls. Again, it's kind of a guilty pleasure, I guess. I kind of enjoy the song. It's catchy. It's a good representation of that time, blah, blah, blah. Same shit I already said. And again, you fucking... pick the goddamn song. It's probably in the top 10 for me. But this album, 3, it's pretty high in terms of Motley Crue.
So I have this album at number 7. To me, this album is very interchangeable with Theater of Pain in the sense that they could they're both just kind of mad at me. They basically, in my eyes, give you the best 2 songs on the entire album right away in Girls, Girls, Girls and Wild Side. And then the rest is just your very basic... typical disposable Motley Crue songs. I don't really care for this album much at all. I do, however, appreciate the fact that it got back to a little more raw, gritty, nasty sound versus this more happy, upbeat, over-polished deal. I prefer when I listen to the Crue to have balls, not makeup. So balls over makeup for me. I absolutely love the fact that they decided to write a song about somebody's grandma. However, oh my God, it's bad. Nona is so fucking terrible. I'm sorry if you like that song. This song is just dog shit to me for the fact that, sure, it's like a short interlude kind of instrumental, but the fact that Vince Neil just keeps saying the fucking corny ass phrase, "I'm out of my head over you, Nona," completely ruins the song. In my eyes, it makes it for a joke for the rest of my life. It's just bad. And that's the kind of shit that pops up on their discography all the time. Shit like this is a constant theme with these guys. It's downright atrocious. And let's be honest, Jailhouse Rock, that song would get your ass fucking shanked in a real prison. It's garbage, okay? Their covers are terrible. Mick Mars, I love you, but you could not save this album in my eyes. I'm sorry. Number 7.
Well, this album was immensely successful once again, and honestly, more warmly received by critics and fans. This one kind of got back to the Motley Crue being the semi-lovable dirtbags that I guess they are. But because, they're dirtbags and they do dirtbag things, and, well, the excess and all that, once again came to a head. On December 23rd, 1987, Nicky overdosed yet again. This time, he died, clinically. Of course, he came back. Anyway, though, this brush with death finally inspired more than a song about a brush with death. It actually inspired him to go to rehab. A very long stint in rehab, so much so that the band just kind of held off on touring for the entire year of, I believe, 1988. And, well, they all had their issues. They all ended up going to rehab anyway, pretty much that year. So, yeah, that was the year of rehabilitation.
Cleansing, if you will.
Now, an interesting thing that kind of happened during this time was apparently they got sued once again. I know, it's not an old manager at this time. Apparently, Nikki Sixx had a quote-unquote doppelganger. There was a guy that said he was standing in for Nicky when he was recovering, and he would be on stage, and he'd play bass, and he even did some studio stuff, and he launched a lawsuit with them, which, honestly, it wasn't resolved until 1993 when the dude just kind of gave up and disappeared. So I don't think there was really anything to that, but I just thought it was just yet another weird thing that involved Motley Crue in a courtroom. Anyway, now we have a cleanish and sober-ish Motley Crue. They returned to the studio, but this time they tapped one Bob Rock, which I can't hear any of you groaning right now, but I'm sure some Metallica fans are groaning right now. And they got back to the studio in late 1988, pretty much through early 1989. And on August 28th, God, that's my mom's birthday, 1989, they would release Dr. Feelgood. This is my number 4. Honestly, it's not a bad album. It's kind of a party album, duh. It's also their highest selling album to date. It's probably their most well-known, some of their biggest singles. Apparently, the production on here inspired Lars Ulrich to get a hold of Bob Rock so he could produce the Black Album, pretty much proving that Bob Rock, Motley Crue, and Lars Ulrich all affect metal very negatively. But to its credit for what this album is, it is bigger, it's hookier, lots of guests on here. Dude, everyone jumped on this one. Robin Zander and Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. Most of Skid Row is on here. Brian Adams, Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, and Jack Blades from Night Ranger. All of them doing backup vocals or contributing something of some kind. Honestly, some of these songs are pretty fun. Yeah, of course, Kickstart My Heart, the title track, good songs. But I actually kind of like Slice of Your Pie.
I do too.
And the end of that is a reasonably decent tribute to She's So Heavy by the Beatles, which, honestly, that's a pretty damn good song. Same Old Situation, too. I really wish I didn't like that song, but I actually do. And Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away. I mean, admittedly, it's kind of funny. But, yeah, they kind of brought back, the sleazy swagger, but they did it, I guess, in a more refined way. Honestly, the best way to describe this was already described by Martin Popoff years ago, when he just pretty much said, this is a really dumb band trying really hard. That pretty much describes this across the board. There's some really dumb songs, though, of course, Rattlesnake Shake. That song sucks. And She Goes Down is pure fucking cringe. But yeah, credit where credit's due. In terms of what Motley Crue does, this is definitely one of their better albums. And yeah, some of these songs I'm still kind of a fan of. But overall, yeah, the album's okay. A lot of filler.
Yeah, I had it at number 2. So again, most of what you said, there's some songs I really enjoy. Kickstart My Heart. I think overall, when you're talking about all of 80s hair metal, glam metal, that's one of the best in my opinion. It just gets you fucking going. The first intro going into that riff, it's fucking badass. And the vocals, I don't mind them in that song. Again, there's 3 songs where I don't mind the vocals too much. But Rattlesnake Shake is just odd in general and shitty, but the guitar riffs are kind of cool. Back to Mick Mars, it's the only reason I can get through these albums. So thanks, Mick. I appreciate that. You have made this ranking easier for me by being badass.
I had this at number 1. Oddly enough, at least for me personally, this is probably the better batch of jams, or maybe even the best batch of jams that this band had collectively. The guitar sounds pretty solid, pretty beefy, crunchy tone. Tommy's seems to be firing on all cylinders. And I'm going to be honest, look, if Vince wouldn't try to hit those higher notes, if he wouldn't try so hard to reach for that sound and that persona that glam metal had, where you're supposed to sing high like your nuts are in a vice, if he wouldn't try to hit those notes, it wouldn't have been a really bad thing. Like, it's still not great. I don't think he's really good at what he does at all. I think a drunk Muppet would be a better idea to front Motley Crue than Vince Neil, but nonetheless, if he wouldn't try to hit those high notes, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. Of course, Dr. Feelgood is a great song. Slice of Your Pie, I like that song. It is oddly kind of heavy-ish and groovy, and it's got that kind of cool swagger going on at the bridge of it. Without You, I mean, none of us have Heather Locklear. And really, letting Vince attempt to croon, that probably wasn't the best move. But
double divorce.
Yeah, right.
He gets countersued for the song.
Yep. Don't go away mad, just go away. Again, that's kind of funny. And Time for a Change, really change vocalists. But I mean, overall, for me, as far as Motley Crue is concerned, if someone again held a gun to me, much like they did for you for 10 songs, and they said, pick a favorite Motley Crue album, I would probably say Dr. Feelgood, and that's why it's number 1 for me.
I agree with John. I think this is the best Motley Crue album. Dr. Feelgood was finally a Crue album where I enjoyed more than 2 songs.
Yep.
Really, I could go through and list all the songs I like, but I found it easier to just list the songs I didn't like, and there was only 3. She Goes Down. No thank you.
Dude.
Time for a Change. Yes, that's foreshadowing. Without You. No, just no. But to touch on the things that I did like, it's a classic 80s album. This is, once again, if you're talking about list of the most influential hair metal, glam metal albums, this has to be up there. It is raunchy, it is dirty, it is sleazy, it is fun. It kept all that sleaze from Girls, but to me, they created songs that were way more memorable with way better hooks. However, you know what? No matter how much Vince Neil sweet talks me, he will never get a slice of my sweet pie. That I can assure you. But this album is top-notch, I think. I do enjoy listening to this album.
I'm so glad you drew that line in the sand there. Yeah. That's very important. So yeah, this is their most successful album to date. It peaked in the Billboard charts, actually hit number 1. Both the title track and Kickstart My Heart were nominated for Grammys in 1990 and 1991 respectively, but they both lost, and both times to Living Colour. Way to go, Vernon Reid. Thank you for keeping heavy music cooler than Motley Crue. But once again, turmoil, because that's what this band thrives on. They ended up firing Doc McGee in 1989 and leaving Doug Thaler to take over, well, handling the band, which I'm sure he was like, oh,
what did
great.
I sign up for?
So they ended up touring through 89 and 90. They released a greatest hits comp that went to number 2 in the Billboard charts as well. And, all this stuff seems like things were going well in the band. Well, wrong. This is Motley Crue. Things eventually go to shit with this band. Vince ended up quitting or being fired. Depends on who's telling the story. But yeah, this band kind of entered this period of limbo. And all right, around this time, you had this emerging style of heavier music coming around called grunge. And pretty much all the hair metal bands are kind of getting pushed out. So it's kind of a period of uncertainty in terms of being, honestly, like a heavy band in general. Mm-hmm. So the band began auditioning different singers. They initially auditioned one Stephen Charcot of Kick Tracy, but ultimately they went with one John Corabi, formerly of the band Angora and The Scream. And with him, they also got a guitarist as well. So this new album would actually feature 2 guitarists on it, which would be a first for this band. And they were also, again, trying to forge a new direction. They wanted to kind of keep up with the times, but again, they've been so rooted in this one sound that you're at this kind of weird point in the band where you could play the same stuff, you have your built-in fan base, there's some diehards that are going to stay there, but you also have a whole bunch of young fans that you really want to appeal to and show them that you're the cool uncle that'll buy them cigarettes and beer. So once again, they would get Bob Rock to produce, and on March 15th, 1994, they would release their self-titled album, Motley Crue. This is my number 2. The most un-Motley Crue album probably out of this entire discography. And admittedly, I had not listened to this one until I went into this ranking, because most Motley Crue fans were like, nah, fuck that album. It doesn't got Vince on it. It doesn't sound like this or that. So I just kind of avoided it. And honestly, listening to it, I like it, honestly. Like, musically, totally different. This is way more grunge. Even like some kind of like heavier groove metal stuff. Like, honestly, there's stuff in here that reminds me of like Soundgarden, Corrosion of Conformity, Stone Temple Pilots. John Corabi is an infinitely better singer than Vince Neil. Flat out. Like, there's really not even a contest here.
Your cat is an infinitely better singer than
He hits some notes every now and then that are, well, Vince Neil-ish. The production on here is light years different than anything else. The guitar is way more down-tuned. There's more slow, menacing, kind of darker songs. Okay. All in all, it's a heavier album. And I just kind of like this vibe. And in terms of drum performances,
yes,
I think this is Tommy Lee's best one. Like, he's got a lot of cool, like, off-time grooves in here. It seems like he's just doing more than that standard 4/4 time stomp, which, I mean, yeah, it propelled a lot of Motley Crue songs pretty well. But I kind of like that this was outside of their comfort zone. And Mick actually seemed to enjoy doing this one too, because he had another guitarist to play off of. There are some big old meaty riffs on here. Power to the Music, Uncle Jack, Hammered, Till Death Do Us Part, Smoke the Sky. That's like hella stony. And I like stoner metal. Almost kind of borders on sludge metal at times too. It's a really solid album, but I can definitely see why the diehards don't like it. And in terms of like trying to get in that whole grunge circle, well, they missed the mark. Because by 1994, when this dropped, that was already kind of being phased out. Like, even the post-grunge bands like Candlebox, they weren't doing as well. So it was already kind of getting to the point, well, yeah, we're on to the new thing. And, well, you know, it didn't catch on for Motley Crue, but I'll go into that in a little bit.
I had this at number 5. Goodbye, Vince. Hello, John. Maybe the reason I like this so much is because it doesn't sound like Motley Crue. This reminded me more of like a Alice in Chains record or Soundgarden or Corrosion of Conformity. It's more riffy. I like the music. I like 2 guitarists. It's neat just seeing them play off of each other, and like you can tell, to me it sounds inspired. To me it sounds like they were tired of whatever direction they were going to, and whether or not they wanted to jump on the grunge train is irrelevant. It just sounds like they were inspired as musicians. Like, Tommy is actually firing on all cylinders and playing some really cool things, and like, granted, not cool, like, you know, we talk about death metal all the time, and he's not going to get there, but like, there is more than just a standard rock beat going on. Like, he's trying new things. You can tell that he's got a little bit more to work with because there's different stuff being presented here. Uncle Jack is a really riffy song. Hooligan's Holiday, I thought was actually kind of heavy. Misunderstood sounds a little bit like Soundgarden, but being played by Aerosmith. I don't know. I think it's in the vocals.
That's a good way of putting that song, really.
Dropping Like Flies, I thought was straight up Alice in Chains. And like, I don't know, even though there were bits and pieces of the mix that I would tear apart, like the lead tone I thought sounds a little bit thin. All in all, it was a pretty solid record. And again, I think I like it so much because it doesn't sound like Motley Crue. And by this point in the ranking, I was tired of Motley Crue. So I'm thankful for this record.
Yeah, I had it number 4. Honestly, this will probably be the only Motley Crue song or album that I go back and listen to again, because I only listened to it the one time going through this, and I really enjoyed it. It was like a breath of fresh air, and then you could tell in the playing, especially drums, like you guys mentioned, there was like no limitations. Everything was new, and they had no preconception of what they wanted. They just wanted to, do something different. There was a little marketing there. Obviously, they wanted to appeal to this thing that was going on. They didn't know that it wasn't going to last that long. So, but a lot of this stuff is pretty heavy, and I think if this album maybe would have came out 6 years later, maybe it probably would have did a little better if it wasn't Motley Crue and they named it something different, because some of the stuff sounds like what you'd hear later in bands like Soil and stuff. So, but Alice in Chains vibe, Stone Temple Pilots, I love all the stuff that this kind of like, it's like a cover band of those bands is writing their first album. Bridge to Death, Do Us Apart is pretty good, especially that whole part that comes after the solo. The solo, which I enjoy. Again, Mick Mars' playing is awesome. And a lot of these riffs really fucking slam. Hammered, Welcome to Numb, Smoke in the Sky was a fantastic song, I thought.
That.
So I think by going back and listening to this again, it would probably go up pretty high, if not maybe my favorite, because I'm just not into Motley Crue.
What a way to discover that by having to go through all their albums.
Right.
I also have this at number 4. This album's a little odd for me. Overall, it is not a bad record, but to me, it's not a Motley Crue record. Every frill and lace accessory they threw right on out the window. John Corabi brings a whole new vibe. I'm sure he does have something to do with the new sound of this band because, let's face it, they probably brought in this guy and were more than eager to pick his brain for songs and new ideas. I think it's weird that they self-titled this album, though, because, once again, they self-titled this as Motley Crue when it's the least sounding Motley Crue album ever. The same guys who wrote She Goes Down, Piecier Action, and Sticky Sweet are now trying to be super edgy and stuff. It didn't feel authentic to me. Mick and the guitars, of course, are crushing it, killing it. There's a lot of great musical ideas that you've never heard on Motley Crue albums before. It's definitely very solid musically. John Corabi does a great job, but it's a love-hate relationship, I think, with it because it's just so anti-Motley Crue rest of discography. It's a weird mix.
Well, initially it did well. It debuted at number 7 overall, but it quickly kind of petered out of the Billboard charts altogether. This, as I said, ended up alienating their fan base. This does not appeal to their older fans, and newer fans were already moving on to whatever the next greener pasture is. What, like new metal, I guess, at this point was kind of the new heavier trend. It came out at the wrong time, and it was so, again, un-Motley Crue that it sounded like an entirely different band. This was also a period where they would kind of sour with their relationship with MTV. Apparently, someone said something to Nicky and he got off in a huff and left during an interview, and they said some harsh stuff. So MTV just said, you know what, we're kind of done with you anyway, so bye.
At the same time, though, MTV was almost being done with being MTV anyway, so I mean, like, fucking whatever.
They also tried to do a big tour for this. You know, this was a band that was used to playing like giant arenas and such. Well, it started off with arena tours, and then they started to realize that the crowds were getting really small, so they started scaling down the tour with each date at like smaller venues to the point where they just flat out quit and just canceled the tour altogether. Now, during this time, Vince Neil actually released 2 solo albums that I didn't listen to. Exposed in 1983 and Carved in Stone in 1995. And it was during this point that, you know, again, the band was kind of in a low spot. Corabi, you know, being a pretty reasonable guy, actually suggested the band, like, hey, you know, bringing back Vince for a couple of songs, something like that. That might actually, you know, get some interest back in the band. Which, of course, because he told this to Motley Crue, they went with that idea and just said, well, fuck it, we're just going to fire you. Actually, we're going to have you come in the studio, fire you in person, tell you to go home, and we're going to call Vince again. I think that was partially a decision from the band and then the board execs, which were like, my God, that last album sold like shit. Let's just get Vince back. So now they were all back together to work on a comeback album. And since Bob Rock was so damn expensive to work with, they kind of scaled it down and got one Scott Humphrey to do the production, which, you know, he had help from Tommy and Nicky to do co-production. I don't know how much help that would actually be, but they were there. Now, here's the thing. Some of these songs were written with Corabi in mind on vocals. So you had material that they had been working on with him, and then some stuff that they worked on once Vince rejoined the band. So some colliding camps already. And to be honest, well, John Corabi could do more vocally than Vince ever could. So there was some stuff there that I believe Vince was just flat out not comfortable singing because even he knew he couldn't do it. So yeah, this was already all over the place, but on June 24th, 1997, they will release Generation Swine. Jesus Christ, this album is pure dog shit from the first note. This is my number 9 overall. Dude, this went from zero to suck in a split second. And this is like one of the perfect examples of an aging band trying to be hip and cool, but this is like trying to make, I don't know, like mayo or toilet paper like an edgy product or something like that. Like, you can't. It's just what it is. But yeah, they had them in this more new metal, alt rock look. Dude, it's like putting like tribal tattoos and nose rings on Muppets or Looney Tunes characters. Like, you're not gonna make them edgy.
It's Meet the Feebles.
Dude, yeah, except Meet the Feebles is cool. Yeah. The first song I ever heard was actually on the radio here in Toledo. One of our DJs put it on and was like, hey, we got a new Motley Crue for you. And then he played it and probably felt the collective sighs of the entire city. And then as soon as it was over, it was like, hey, well, that was a song we played. It is bland. It is boring. It sounds like a discount nu metal band covering 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins. Lots of industrial elements. Vince, God, he sucks on here. There's a lot of these fucking moaned vocals, like, oh, I'm trying to sound more emotional and dark. And it's like, yeah, that's a good way to get around the fact that your top range is fucking gone. Let Us Pray was one of the heavier tracks, and that was left over from Karabi, but, you know, Vince was on it, so it was ruined. Dude, like listless 90s alt rock with Confessions. Brandon, God, that song's terrible. Rocket Ship might be one of the worst ones. God, the title track and Anybody Out There, they hit about as hard as Good Fucking Charlotte. Like, even when it came down to like the faster, edgier stuff, there's no edge. Like, this is as edgy as a fucking beach ball. The whole thing is an unfocused mess. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine the board execs heard this and went, yeah, no, fantastic. This is great. And also, Shout of the Devil, 1997, go fuck yourself. Oh my God, why would you do that? Why would you re-record one of your best songs and fucking make it worse? Yeah, no, this album sucks, and this was the first time I've ever made it through that album. I listened to part of it years ago just to hear it, and we've come full circle. And guess what? It's worse than I fucking thought it would be.
I had this at number 7, and I'm going to be honest with everybody watching this. At this point in the game, I'm just throwing numbers on shit, because at this point, I honestly stopped caring. And the music, this record, and after this, I think everyone will agree, just plain sucks. This record sucks. Vince returns and somehow is worse, which makes sense, I guess, if these, vocals weren't necessarily written for him. He can't do what he does. Why would he be able to do what somebody else does? So here we are. And much like the last record, this record doesn't sound a whole hell of a lot like Motley Crue. It sounds like Weezer and Lenny Kravitz and the Smashing Pumpkins and Collective Soul, but all like the bad versions of that. The song Afraid, the vocals are awful.
Oh,
I think it's the worst performance I've heard yet, because there's more coming. Flush reminds me of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Flush that turd.
Yeah, bad. Dude, the title track, Glitter, what the hell is this? Just like, and you know what the weird thing is so while I was listening to this record and taking notes, I was playing Settlers of Catan on the computer, just trying to, like, I don't know, find something fun to do while listening to this, and I kept zoning out, and I forgot who I was listening to.
Honestly, there was a point where it just felt like I was listening to, like, every song I would skip on the entire discography of Stabbing Westward.
Yet again, I never would have ever listened to this record ever had it not been for this ranking, so thanks, Mr. Fucking Pull Numbers Out of a Hat.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this album for me, number 9, because it fucking sucks, too. I agree. The general consensus of this, it's just pushing something out. That's all it is. Generic. There's not much going on. It's lazy. And Glitter is the worst fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of stupid, annoying shit. And Glitter, man, for the sake of the fucking ranking, I didn't skip. Okay? I want you guys to, I want you to know that.
You're a trooper, man.
Anybody out there, decent riffs. Again, I like McMars. I'll listen to, it's like one of those things, I'll watch anything with fucking Brad Pitt. You put that shit on mute. I'm kind of putting everything else on mute and just listening to mix. So Let Us Pray, good tune. I really never heard it before, but it's solidish and decently kind of heavy. you had to pick Motley Crue heavy, don't listen to it. Just don't fucking.
Yeah. That's the consensus.
We did, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
I also ranked this at number 9. To throw Vince Neil back on vocals, why? I don't know. Yes, I understand the thought behind it, but you would think that you would put something out way better than this. This new metal drab with sprinkles of glitter on top is just cheese upon cheese upon cheese. I mean, to me, this was almost the definition of bucking a trend and forcing something that absolutely shouldn't be forced. Not one memorable song, not a hit from this album. No one can remember anything about this album other than it sucked. John Corabi supposedly claims that he actually wrote a good majority of this material, not just that it was written for him, but he claims that he wrote a majority of this material.
Why the fuck would he
stop that claim? Exactly.
Let him fucking own it.
Let them keep the credit for this shitfest because it is unlistenable. If there was ever a record to be expunged from a discography, this would have to be a front runner. It's bad. It's not memorable. It's terrible. Don't listen to it.
So yeah, this album was not well received by critics and fans alike. Though it did debut at number 4, it really dropped right out of the billboards pretty damn quickly. Now the band would try to blame the lack of label support for this album's poor performance. Yeah, that's exactly what happened, guys. Sure. Anyway, Elektra would end up parting ways with Motley Crue, and in this split with the band actually got all of their masters and, all their music in general. Namely because I think Elektra was just sick and tired of dealing with these guys, and there were such pains in the asses. Like, listen, if we just give them all their shit, we never have to talk to them again.
Which I'm good with, because I'm glad when musicians, as awful as some of the shit is, they have their own shit.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
It was also during this time that Tommy Lee would end up leaving the band to work on his solo projects, both Methods of Mayhem and a couple of solo albums. There might have been some adult films in there, too. Also, he went to jail because he hadn't done that yet during this stint. So, they were left without a drummer for a while. I mean, it didn't matter at this point because the band was really stagnant and, I don't know, maybe doing solo stuff and going to jail just sounded like more fun than hanging out with the rest of the band. But the band wouldn't be deterred. They actually started, looking around for different drummers, and they actually ended up former Ozzy drummer Randy Castillo. And they begun work on a new album with producer Mike Klink. Now, what I read about this album that I honestly forgot existed was that they wanted to get Dr. Feelgood Part 2. And, well, you know how sequels generally run. Anyway, on June 11th, 2000, they released New Tattoo. This is my number 8. The nicest thing I could say about this album is it exists. It's very much a back to basics album, emphasis on the word basic. It's got its up-tempo tracks. It's got its fucking dumb tracks like Treat Me Like the Dog I Am. Drag Strip Superstar. I don't know, it's Vince talking about drag racing from a guy that looks like he can't move fast at all.
Vince Neil fucks like a turtle.
The country-esque balladry on the title track, it's Tear in My Roofied Beer. I don't like that song at all. Hollywood Ending, it's a ballad, but there's no country in it, so that's at least run-of-the-mill lame. But yeah, like, all this, it doesn't even have, like, the glitz and glamour of the old days. This sounds like a bar band that tries to shoehorn in their shitty originals. Like, we've all been there. You hear them say, hey, y'all want to hear one that we wrote? And then, like, the wife of the drummer yells, hell yeah! And then everyone stares at this chick like she just shit her pants. There's a couple of heavier cuts, like Punched in the Teeth by Love and Fake. Honestly, those are probably the only 2 songs that I could tolerate on here. This album is just there, and it wasn't even there enough for me to remember it existed. Like, when I was going through all the albums this band released, it was like, oh, there's one I totally forgot about. But number 8, not great.
I also had this at number 8. Let's start with the positive. I appreciate that they wanted to go back to more of their Motley Crue roots and getting back to that heavier, dirty, raunchier sound. However, the songs absolutely failed to deliver. It's almost like the lyrics were taken from a cheesy romance novel of extreme circumstance. Backdoor Valentine? What the fuck? Drag Strip Superstar has this beautiful quote in it. Jailbait, Playmate, Peep Show, Masturbate. What? What the fuck is that? An elementary kid that just learned his first 5 cuss words wrote these lyrics, and they are terrible. To me, it's almost like they're like, man, you know what? It's been quite a dry spell. Let's remind all these middle-aged ladies now that our dicks still work even after all that whiskey and coke. And they wrote New Tattoo because it's basically them trying to put their dicks out into the real world, and it is god-awful. Number 8, I'm done.
Yeah, 8. Because that's the number now, and it's an improvement over the last album, which isn't saying much because the last album fucking sucked. At least they're trying. I guess they're trying to do an album, and the other one wasn't doing that at all. So it seems more Motley Crue than the last one for sure, but it's just bland. Nothing stands out. It's all fucking dumb.
I had this at number 9. I hate this record. Look, if we're saying nice things, right? I'm going to say something nice. At least they got away from the stupid nu metal bullshit and stopped doing that and tried to come back as Motley Crue and do what Motley Crue does, unfortunately. And that's what they did. But outside of that, there's not a goddamn thing on this record that I like. Not at all.
Randy Castillo.
He's on it. And that's decent. Yeah, he's on it, and
but
that's good.
He's not. But really he's not on it.
Right. Exactly. He's not really doing anything. Right.
Yeah.
If anything, he's being a little bit more solid and in the pocket than Tommy Lee was, and that's the only thing he's doing. Treat me like the dog that I am. Can you teach an old dog new tricks just once? Not the same old trick.
Play dead already.
Yeah, for real, dude. Fucking punched in the teeth by love. Punch me in the face and knock me out. That's the only thing I want you to do because I'm done with this album.
I could write love across my knuckles if that works better.
Yeah. Vince Neil sounds like Vince Neil again. Great. The gift that no one asked for. Yeah, number 9. I hate this record.
I just imagine them in the booths at points being like, "Hey, Randy, could you play that but like shittier?"
You're too good. People are going to think you're hogging all the talent you are.
Right.
Yeah, this album did not do very well, both critically, financially. It only debuted at number 41 on the Billboard charts and then, slid right out. The reviews, again, very mixed. And there was, again, tension in the band, of course, because, a lot of mixed songwriting was really just kind of thrown aside. He actually didn't have very much in the way of songs on here that he wrote. Now, right before they decided to go out touring, Randy sadly fell ill. He had a duodenal ulcer that he just couldn't do the tour for, and then sadly, through all the surgeries and such, they discovered that Randy had cancer, which sadly he passed in 2002. They tapped one Samantha Maloney to fill out the touring. She was from Hole. I guess she, did a pretty solid job. The band would end up going on hiatus once again. Nicky would focus on his side projects, 58 and Brides of Destruction. Neil ended up doing reality TV because that's what C-list celebrities do. And during this time, Mick took a break from all this to focus on his health because he'd been battling a hereditary form of arthritis where his bones are essentially fusing. So, there's a reason why he looks rather weathered. He's been battling this stuff for years. In 2001, the Dirt autobiography came out, and that kind of propelled the band out into the spotlight again, sadly. People had a renewed interest because this was all the dirty stories about the band, and like, oh my god, they did that. It's like, yeah, no, they did. Anyway, they officially got back together in 2004. They toured, they dropped Red, White, and Crüe in 2005, which was another compilation / greatest hits, but it featured new tracks. So they were, again, working on new material. They were starting to pop up on TV again. They had their Motley Cruise, their whole little boat thing. I don't know, I didn't give a shit. Imagine being stuck in a boat with Motley Crue and a bunch of Motley Crue fans. The only thing that would make that worse is like a case of botulism.
I'd jump the fuck off that boat. I'd take my fucking chances with sharks, and Nick and I fucking hate sharks.
Yeah, dude.
I would take my chances.
Better than Crüe.
You okay? I'm a lot better than you.
Oh yeah, once again they ended up in court because a former manager was suing them. Par for the course. All this, though, going on while they were recording a new album. This time it would be produced by Nicky and DJ Ashba, who is from 6 a.m., another Nicky's side project, to which DJ would actually end up playing a majority of the guitars on this one. Once again, Mick is still being kind of phased out of the band. Again, ongoing theme. Sure, you could say Mick was struggling, but also, you could also just say, well, they're just trying to fuck him over again, because that's what they do. Anyway, June 24th, 2008, they released Saints of Los Angeles. This is my number 6. It is admittedly an improvement. Lots of extra outside help, especially in terms of production. This is probably one of the most overproduced ones so far. Like, you can just definitely tell they went over this thing with a fine-tooth comb and polished the hell of it like they were trying to clean up after a murder. I'll also say that this barely sounds like Motley Crue. The guitars are way more down-tuned. Once again, Vince is so processed that, I mean, it just sounds like an auto-tuned Muppet. But, yeah, I will say that this has better songs overall in terms of, like, the composition. Face Down the Dirt. The title track is admittedly kind of an anthem, even though it's like 90% chorus. Motherfucker of the Year, while it is just a cringy title, it's honestly a pretty decent song. And Just Another Psycho, probably one of their heaviest offerings, at least with like this lineup, really does drag out the choruses a lot in here. Like, the verses really don't take up a lot of space. And the additional dark, edgy atmosphere in here does not fit. Like, the opening intro, LAMF, which stands for LA motherfucker, in case you didn't know. You have Vince speaking through a filter and like sounding all ominous, or at least what he thought was ominous. It sounds adorable. But yeah, you have, you know, kind of just what they do, just with this like more glitzy overall modern sound. Like the balladish, The Animal and Me, you can still hear all of the vocal struggles on there. Chicks Equal Trouble.
Yes.
Dude, I don't like that song. That's old sleaze with a new finish on it.
That's being nice.
Yeah, dude, for real, guys. Start checking IDs before you let them on the bus. I didn't want to hear about your sex lives in your 30s. I definitely don't want to hear about your sex lives in your 60s now. Seriously, this is about as cringy as, like, you know, some old dude that goes to Hooters every day and tries to get to know all the waitresses by their first name. Welcome to the Chino is just thankful that it wasn't a Pink Floyd cover.
Yes, me too.
Don't ruin that song for me, guys. But yeah, it's an improvement, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel like a Motley Crue album. Like, it feels like just your run-of-the-mill kind of butt rock album with, honestly, some like pop punk stuff in there too. Like, there's riffs on there that reminded me of Green Day.
Yeah. And
honestly, I would say Green Day probably did them better. But yeah, number 6, it's all right-ish.
I did it number 8. It's not awful. I mean, it's an improvement, but what are you really improving on at this point? You're improving on the fact that you've moved away from nu metal. That's cool. You're improving on the fact that it wasn't the last album, thank God. You're improving on the fact that you're still trying, I guess, but why at this point in the game? Last album with Mick Mars. Goodbye, Mick. Thank you for what you've done. We all appreciate it, because without you, it probably wouldn't have been a whole lot of anything, period. Let's just be honest here. I think this is Tommy Lee's better performance. Like, I thought he did really well on the drums. In fact, I thought the drum work outshined most of everything else on the record. He's playing with a bunch of different patterns and a bunch of different rhythms, and like the D beat and Face Down in the Dirt, like, that's the first time I've heard a D beat in a Motley Crue song, for sure.
It's been a while.
There were a couple songs I didn't mind. Motherfucker of the Year, I actually kind of like that song. Animal and Me, I just kind of like the swagger to it. It's a groovy little jam, and that's those are the positive things I have to say about this record. Other than that, it's just here. They tried. They can't really seem to find their sound, I think, at this point in the game, and they're just like, here's a record. And that's what this record was for me, so number 8.
Yeah, it's less nu metal, but somehow not, because Papa Roach is on it too.
Right.
I don't know, whatever.
I don't know.
7, because again, just slightly better than the last, but it's just there. It's like a reoccurring thing with these guys. Motherfucker of the Year is good. I like it. It's got a good flow and it works pretty well. Everything ties together there. This Ain't a Love Song is okay, but again, it's stupid. And when the only thing you latch on into an album, Motley Crue album, is the fucking drums. I don't know. It's all dumb.
Now, I actually have this ranked at number 3. And you may say to yourself, man, that's a good rating. That just goes to show you how weak this discography truly is. I remember when this album came out, I actually really loved the song Saints of Los Angeles. I remember when it came out, I listened to it a bunch. I still enjoy that song. And there's might be one or two other songs that aren't bad. But all in all, man, finding out that, once again, Mick Mars gets kind of pushed out so Nikki Sixx can have more control and bring one of his guys in. Just hearing that just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, because if there's one thing I know we all can agree on is basically that dude's back probably is fusing together from carrying those three dumb motherfuckers for 20 years. No matter how many times they tried to kick him out, he stood there and kept coming out with good shit and being the best part of this band for a lot of years. So that definitely rubbed me the wrong way. The music was heavy and good, but yeah, it had some of that, like Nick was saying, Papa Roach kind of element. Some of that nu metal shit still wasn't 100% gone. And while the music definitely was heavier, songs like Chicks Equal Trouble, Motherfucker of the Year, it really shows that the maturity of the lyrics never ever went past high school. And I'll just leave it at that.
Now, despite this album having a lot of mixed reviews, it did debut at number 4 on the Billboard charts. The title track was the second highest charting single on U.S. mainstream rock charts, which I still find hard to believe, but whatever, that's true. The other singles did not chart as well. 2 huge tours after this. The Crüe Fest in 2008 with Buckcherry, Papa Roach, 6 a.m., and Trapped. Seriously, I'm not kidding. That was the tour lineup. Talk about a who's who of who fucking cares. Then you also had the Saints of Los Angeles tour in 2009 with Hinder, Theory of a Dead Man, and Last Vegas. There was a Crüe Fest 2, I believe. I didn't want to look up or name drop any more shitty bands, so I just skipped that. They also popped up on Ozfest 2010. Vince made another solo album in between here in the next offering. No one seemed to care. Now here's where the band announced their plans to retire. And I immediately didn't fucking believe them. So in 2014, they made this announcement, coupled with a 70-date U.S. tour. Even doubled down on the retirement thing by signing a cessation of touring agreement, stating that they couldn't tour under the banner Motley Crue after 2015. I didn't believe that either, but they did play their final show on New Year's Eve 2015 in LA. Now, some years pass, and it is announced that The Dirt is being made into a movie. I watched it, and it exists. It's okay, and I don't even know how many of these stories are actually true, and I left not caring.
I also watched it. It's there.
It's there.
My TV was on, and there were people.
But once again, like the cockroaches of glam rock that they are, renewed interest. People started going, hey, Motley Crue's kind of cool, and people like us were like, dude, no, they're not. But people were interested in them again, and lo and behold, to the surprise of fucking no one, there was a loophole in their agreement with the whole cessation of touring. As long as all 4 members agreed to reform, which is the easiest fucking loophole to actually overcome, they could be Motley Crue again. So in 2020, they announced they would be taking part in the Stadium Tour, the big one with Def Leppard, Poison, Joan Jett, and the Blackhearts. And because it was such a terrible idea, God gave the world COVID. But seriously, folks, the tour was postponed, obviously, in 2020 and again in 2021. They did manage to do it in 2022. And that would be followed by a statement from Vince Neil saying that they would be touring again in 2023. And they would only be a touring band. They were not going to write any more music. I also didn't believe that. But during this time, Mick announces his retirement. Again, touring for him was very difficult with his spinal issues. And, well, the band had been trying to get rid of him for years. Maybe he was like, you know what? Fuck you guys, I'm done. But the band still wanted to continue touring, so in steps John Five as their new touring guitarist. John Five, immensely talented guitarist that plays with bands that really don't utilize his talent. He was formerly of Rob Zombie at this point. He decides to step in and just, kind of take care of the touring. Until April of 2023, where it is announced that John Five is officially a member of the band and he is their new guitarist. To which the band is promptly sued by Mick Mars. Yeah, he's suing them based on the whole, allegedly trying to get rid of him and kind of shuffling off his work. They've been trying to do this for years. And of course, the band denied all this because honesty is one of the things that Motley Crue is known for. That same month, they also announced that they have been working on new music with Bob Rock.
Yay.
Imagine my excitement. They had signed a deal with Big Machine Records, and they were going to do an EP rather than an album. Most of the band's EPs are trash, which is why we haven't covered them. And generally, they don't have any original material on them. They're just like, hey, this is a live B-side and another cover we did. Doesn't this suck? But this had new material, the first new material in a while. And yeah, I had no expectations. And, well, they got lower after I listened to it. On October 4th, 2024, they released the canceled EP. Dead Fucking Last. This EP is 13 minutes of hot garbage. I still stand by my statement in the review where I believe that MCA should have come back as a vengeful wraith and burned down the studio where they recorded that awful fucking cover of Fight for Your Right. But the two main songs were also terrible. Gloriously overproduced, of course. Drums sound fake. Vince sounds like they used the entire effects package to make him sound like a human being. I've already done a full-on review for this EP. If you really want to know all of my thoughts on it, and they are still just as harsh, watch that. I'm going to let these guys roast this thing.
I also had this at number 10, Dead Last. All right, now, so here's the thing. I was never, ever going to listen to this, ever. But because of this ranking, Nick said I had to, and so I did. But let's look at it this way. I remember when Nick messaged me and said there's a new Motley Crue album, and I said, nope, ain't happening, not doing it. And he said, well, we could because it would be funny. And I said, I don't care. That record's a piece of shit. Because I had already read all the reviews for this thing, and I was like, I'm not touching it. I still have that text file. If anybody wants to see that, send me a message on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, and I'll show you the conversation where I tried to talk this guy out of reviewing it. The record is garbage. Why even continue at this point? You got John Five, who is an incredible guitarist. He's a great musician. You didn't let him really do anything, and I think really it shows on the two original songs, at least. It shows that he at least tried, I think. I think he tried, but the band is so fucking terrible that they wouldn't let him. They just said, well, this is too flashy. We're not those kind of people. We're all sleazy, dirty assholes. I mean, we're talking about, like, what, Five Finger Crüe here at this point in the game? Maybe don't. Maybe the next time you get an idea to release an album, don't.
Smother it with a pillow.
This record is full on butt. We're talking about, like, open Neil ass. That's what this record is. It's awful. I am angry because I had to listen to this record.
Dead last as well. I mean, naturally an EP is probably going to be last anyway because it's not a full album. So in a discography ranking, I think naturally it's a natural place to put it, but it's also the right place to put it because it's trash. I'm not going to sit here and bash on it for 5 minutes like I easily could. The thought that comes to my mind is one of my favorite quotes from Spinal Tap. Shark sandwich, more like shit sandwich. And that's all I have, folks.
Yeah, I love John Five. I really love
He's
John.
a
He's
amazing
one
player.
of my favorite guitarists, and I didn't want anything to ruin that, so I refused to listen to this.
Motley Crue to the rescue, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep, I'm sorry. I love you guys. I love all you. I love it, but I got to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, no, it sucks. You didn't miss
I wish
anything.
I had that option. I really do.
Same.
But I didn't.
And that brings us to present time. And, yeah, part of this was kind of fun to go over. Most of this was just regret for me drawing the wrong genre, or even putting Glam Metal on there. Or, you know, you guys could have picked Twisted Sister or Rat or Dokken. I would have been much happier with those. But, yeah, Motley Crue won. And here we are. But, yeah, this was still fun. Just kind of sit back and make fun of a band that definitely deserves it. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships now. They're only 99 cents, and we do a members-only live stream. We're going to get down to that probably next month because John here was very ill for a while, but he's doing fine now, outside of having to listen to Motley Crue.
Yeah, well, that made me sick again.
That probably did make him sick again. But the memberships are the new way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and hats. That is linked down below. And again, if you are interested in becoming a member, There's a membership button somewhere down there.
It's there. And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings. Thank God we're done with this one because I hated it. Actually, the next one in line for the ranking will be the almighty At the Gates, which I am so very thankful for. I will be at the helm of said matters, and it'll be a good time. Again, a much better time than this one was.
Also, most importantly, you, the fan, is someone we want to take the time to thank. Thank you so much to the community that we have acquired during this whole time. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to watch our videos. And thank you to everyone who has ever supported us by letting us into your homes while you were in uncompromised positions.
I couldn't have said it better. We got through it, boys. How about it?
I'm happy.
We love you guys, as always. Until next time.